I want to say a few words about theory and the way in which we use theory to understand the world. We are obviously surrounded by people and their theories all the time. We have our own theories about everything, and so does everybody else, and these get tossed backwards and forwards. But people don't really understand what a theory is and its relationship to reality. And the fact is that we made a big mistake culturally in thinking that the world could be understood by creating theories about it. So, to begin, what is a theory? Theories are based on three elements. Firstly, there is the element of observation, and secondly, of description, and thirdly, of explanation. So, sometimes these are called three levels of adequacy. The first level of descriptive of observational adequacy is that if we want to have a theory, we need to have some data, and that data needs to be properly observed and accurate, and we need to have as much data as necessary, and we need to be able to exclude irrelevant data. And once we've got that data, that we've observed the world, some aspect of it, we then put that data into categories in order to describe it. And following that, we come up with theories that would explain that data. And I think a good example of this, to make it practical, is Galileo, one of the first theorists of this kind, who, using his telescope, which he had to make himself, a good example of how technology precedes science, it's not the product of science, he used his telescope to make various observations of the solar system, and that led him to have doubts about the theory that is now known as the geocentric theory, the theory that our observations can be explained by supposing that the Earth is not moving, it's in the center of the universe, and around the Earth we have circulating first the moon, and then the planets, and then the sun, and then the stars. But this theory doesn't explain what we observe. It simply observes and describes what we're seeing. And according to this way of looking at things, there are some anomalies, really, some things that are kind of weird. For example, that the planets seem to speed up, slow down, stop, go backwards. And there really isn't any theory that would explain why they do that. They just do that from the point of view of our observations here on the Earth. But what Galileo saw was that there are anomalies under this theory, sort of proto-theory. And it led him to think that maybe another theory would be better. Now, why would it be better? It would be better if we assumed that the sun was at the center of the solar system and that the Earth was going around the sun along with the planets. Because then you can see that the planets don't speed up and slow down and go backwards. They are following their own orbits around the sun, much as the Earth does. And that the reason they appear to speed up and slow down is because their movement relative to the Earth produces that phenomenon. So he took this theory to the Pope and said, what do you think about this? And the Pope was in the middle of some serious political negotiations with, I can't remember who, either the French or the Germans. The Pope was about to change sides in one of the interminable European Christian wars. And his reaction was, not now, Galileo, please. I don't want to seem flaky. I'm in the middle of some important negotiations. And in any case, your theory seems to be contradictory to the Bible, where it more or less clearly says, apparently, that the Earth is not moving, the sun is moving, the moon is moving, and the stars and all that. It's the geocentric model that is the biblical model, and you've got some interesting observations here, but now is not the time. And it's here that Galileo made his kind of mistake, because he wanted to insist that his theory wasn't just a theory. It was what was actually happening. In other words, that his theory held up a mirror to reality and reflected the reality that was there beyond his theory, and that his theory was true. And this applies to everybody's theories. People like to think that their theories are true, meaning that their theory holds up a mirror to and reflects the actual reality that that theory is about. And it's kind of hard to shake this idea that your theories about reality are actually true. But this is a kind of truth that we don't really need. It's useful in science and technology, but it's a theory of truth that's called the correspondence theory. The idea is that my theory actually corresponds to reality, and that's what we mean by truth. And it's falling into this error that has led to all the problems of modernity. Because theories, you can never know if they're true, even by your own standards of the truth as accuracy of correspondence, because all you know so far is that your theory explains what we can see so far. You never know if there's going to be new data, new observations, new categories of description, and therefore you're going to have to change your theory, as Galileo was suggesting, changing from a geocentric theory to a heliocentric theory. But what we see now, hundreds of years later, is that the sun itself is actually moving. So you can see this video on YouTube, a reconstruction of what the sun is really doing, and the sun is moving through space. So the vast speed, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of miles per hour, the sun is moving through space. So the Earth and the planets are not performing some neat orbit around the sun. They are actually following the sun through space, and it's more like a kind of helix, an unraveling helix. So it's not as simple as you thought. And what's interesting about that the video is that at first it assumes a point of view. It's a reconstruction, obviously. It assumes a point of view where you see the sun going past you and you see the planets sort of following along in a mad scramble after the sun. And then the point of view moves around so that you're seeing the sun coming towards you and the planets are performing their dance around the sun. And that raises the interesting question of what is really going on. And it depends. Your observations depend on your point of view. If Galileo had not insisted that his theory was true, but it was simply a better theory, because good theories not only explain what you've observed so far, but also will make predictions which you can then use to verify your theory to some extent. If a theory will predict something, and you go out and you find out if actually that prediction kind of comes true, and if that prediction comes true, it gives you more confidence in your theory, although that can never arrive at absolute certainty, because there's always more data in the future that might require you to either change your theory or, in the case of physics notably, completely review your whole paradigm. And in physics, we now see that there are huge questions being raised by quantum mechanics, to the extent that it all is beginning to look extremely baffling, and simple theories of planets revolving around stars, revolving around galaxies, that may not be actually happening at all. And we need to rewrite our whole understanding of the nature of energy. Perhaps time doesn't even exist as we understand it. We see things from our localized point of view, but we only see a tiny fraction of what's actually there. So the idea that we build theories and that these theories explain reality is a very naive one. And the consequence of this is that you always have to be prepared to admit that your theory might be wrong. And in any case, if we're describing reality as we experience it as human beings, the world is a much messier, more complicated place than can simply be grasped by some theory, no matter how complex. We have to be anti-realists. And if Galileo had simply said, I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying it's a better theory. It would have avoided all the problems. He had to be punished by the Pope for refusing to retract. And frankly, I have every sympathy with the Pope on this one. Why insist that you're right? You can never know if you're right. And that's the reality that we have to deal with. And that includes our theories about everything, our theories about ourselves, our theories about God, our theories about everything that's happening around us. And just to finish, the one problem with what's sometimes called the God hypothesis, which is that it's God that is doing everything, is that it's just not a good explanation. It's completely useless. If your theory as to why things happen is that God is doing it, then how is that going to help you to predict anything? A good theory should be able to explain, and a good explanation should be able to predict what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. But if your theory is that God is doing everything, which he is, but if that's you see that as a theory, it explains absolutely everything. I mean, why is my cat vomiting this morning? Well, God's doing it. Why didn't I pass my exams? Oh, God was doing it. Are we going to have a nuclear war? Well, we can't say because God's doing it and we can't read the mind of God. And the whole point of this is to say that the idea that we construct theories in order to understand reality has had its day. The truth is much deeper and subtler and more profound than simply correspondence between our ideas about the world and the world as it really is.